Imagine an open field where thousands of young soldiers are lined up in muddy trenches, waiting for the signal to advance. On 1st July 1916, on what would be called the British Army's worst day, brave men charged out of their positions to face a wall of enemy fire. Such is the drama of the Battle of the Somme, one of the bloodiest battles in human history. Today, we explore how this confrontation began, the horrors it wrought, and the devastating impact it left on the world. The First World War. The First World War, 1914 to 1918, was a global conflict that involved the major world powers of the time. War broke out after the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria in Sarajevo, sparking a series of military alliances that quickly divided the world into two blocks. The Central Powers, led by Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire, and the Allies, led by France, the United Kingdom, and Russia. By 1916, the war had already turned into a brutal stalemate in the trenches of the Western Front. Both sides were exhausted, with millions of dead and few significant territorial gains. It was against this backdrop of stagnation that the Battle of the Somme was planned. Trench warfare. Trenches were complex networks of tunnels, bunkers, and observation posts, often filled with mud, rats, and disease. Soldiers could go months without seeing the sun. The role of the United States. Although the United States was not yet officially involved in the war in 1916, its economic support for the Allies was crucial to sustaining the war effort. The decision to fight on the Somme. The Battle of the Somme was conceived as a joint British-French operation to relieve pressure on French forces that were being crushed at Verdun. The goal was to break through German lines along the Somme River, capture strategic territory, and weaken enemy morale. The plans included weeks of preliminary bombardments to destroy German defenses before the Allied troops advanced. However, these bombardments proved ineffective, as many German underground fortifications remained intact. The preliminary bombardments. Over 1.5 million shells were fired at German lines in the 2 weeks leading up to the offensive. The sound was so intense that it could be heard hundreds of miles away. The British strategy. British generals believed that their soldiers could easily advance after the bombardment, but they underestimated the German resistance. The British Army's worst day. On July 1st, 1916, at 7:30 a.m., the attack began. Thousands of British soldiers emerged from their trenches, carrying light weapons, and marched toward the enemy lines. However, they were met by a storm of machine gun fire and heavy artillery. On the first day, some 20,000 British soldiers died, and another 40,000 were wounded, making it the deadliest day in British military history. Despite the huge losses, only small swaths of territory were captured. The Paladins. Many of the soldiers who fought on the Somme belonged to the newly formed Kitchener's Army, composed of civilian volunteers who answered the patriotic call. They fought side by side with friends and neighbors, forming the so-called PALS battalions. Archaic tactics. The generals insisted on traditional frontal assaults, ignoring the lessons learned from previous battles about the effectiveness of trenches and modern weapons. The shock and the resolve. Despite catastrophic losses, the Allies decided to continue the offensive. Now we are ready to explore how the battle evolved in the following months, with new technologies and tactics being introduced in a desperate effort to achieve victory. The battle's development and human cost. Introduction to the battle's development. The Battle of the Somme lasted nearly 5 months, transforming once peaceful fields into lunar landscapes of destruction. In this act, we will explore how the conflict developed, the new technologies that came into play, and the devastating human cost that marked this battle forever. The introduction of tanks. One of the most notable innovations of the Battle of the Somme was the use of tanks for the first time in military history. In September 1916, the British threw in 49 Mark I tanks into the battle, designed to cross trenches and provide support to soldiers. The introduction of tanks. One of the most notable innovations of the Battle of the Somme was the use of tanks for the first time in military history. In September 1916, the British introduced 49 Mark I tanks into the battle, designed to cross trenches and provide support for soldiers. Although the tanks initially caused panic among German troops, many of them broke down or became bogged down in the uneven terrain. Nevertheless, their introduction marked the beginning of a new era in warfare. Early models. The early tanks were slow, heavy, and prone to mechanical failure, but they symbolized the future of mechanized warfare. Psychological impact. The thunderous sound and fearsome appearance of the tanks created fear among enemy soldiers. The struggle for terrain. Over the next few months, the battle devolved into a war of attrition, with both sides fighting for minimal territorial gains. Villages and forests were completely destroyed as soldiers endured extreme conditions. Torrential rains in October turned the battlefield into a quagmire, making advances even more difficult. Despite this, the Allies managed to capture some key areas, such as the village of Thiepval. Deadly mud. The mud was so deep that many soldiers sunk and suffocated, unable to escape. The sound of bombs. The constant noise of explosions and gunfire resulted in auditory and psychological trauma for the soldiers. The human cost. By the end of the battle in November 1916, over 1 million men had been killed or wounded, with negligible territorial gains. For the British and French, the total advance was only 10 kilometers, an unimaginable price for so little progress. Families across Europe were devastated by the losses. Letters sent home by soldiers revealed the horror and hopelessness of the war. Soldiers' letters. Many soldiers wrote letters home describing the hell they experienced in the trenches. These letters are now valuable historical records. Thiepval Memorial. A memorial was built at the site of the battle to commemorate the missing British and South African soldiers. Act 2 Conclusion. The legacy of the battle. The Battle of the Somme was a brutal example of the limitations of traditional military tactics in the face of modern technology. Now we are ready to explore the lasting impact of this event on history and collective memory. Reflections on the legacy of the Battle of the Somme. The Battle of the Somme may have ended in November 1916, but its scars remain to this day. In this act, we will reflect on the impact of the battle on the First World War, its influence on military history, and the role it played in how we remember the horrors of war. Impact on World War I. Although the Battle of the Somme did not significantly change the course of the war, it did weaken German forces and undermine their morale. The battle also highlighted the need for reforms in military tactics, leading to the development of new strategies and technologies. Change of strategy. After the Somme, generals began to adopt more flexible tactics, such as coordinated attacks with artillery and infantry. Loss of confidence. The high death toll led to public distrust of military leaders, especially the British command. Cultural legacy and memorials. The Battle of the Somme has become a symbol of the absurdity and brutality of World War I. Poets such as Wilfred Owen and Siegfried Sassoon captured the horror of war in their works, immortalizing the experiences of the soldiers. Monuments and memorials were erected in honor of the fallen, such as the Thiepval Memorial, which lists the names of over 72,000 British and South African soldiers. War literature. Works such as Wilfred Owen's Dulce Decorum Est challenged patriotic idealism and exposed the brutal reality of war. Remembrance tourism. Today, thousands of visitors travel to the Somme to learn about the battle and pay tribute to the soldiers.
The Battle of the Somme teaches us that war is not just about territorial gains, but about lives lost and dreams destroyed. May this story inspire you to seek peace and understanding between peoples and nations. If you enjoyed this video, please click like, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Until next time.